Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Defender's Blueprint, our cyber version of a fireside chat. I'm joined here today with my co-host Ali Abbas and a few of our advisors from our upcoming Operation Defend the North event. This is a large-scale immersive cybersecurity tabletop exercise happening April 3rd in Vancouver. Now, before we get started, a few announcements. We'll be sharing a discount code to the event later in the stream, more than 10 seconds that I did the last show, so that should be easier to capture. So keep your eyes out, and if you want to save a few dollars and attend Vancouver's first Operation Defend the North, stay tuned. And before we introduce our panelists today, Ali, did you want to do a quick rundown of what Operation Defend the North is?
Absolutely. Hoping that my sound is coming through well from this well-lit, very expensive mic. Hopefully it gives me a good return. So yes, thank you for having me again, Alex, and thank you for everything that you've done putting Operation Defend the North together in Vancouver for the very first time. I've challenged you to explain Operation Defend the North a little bit differently than what I did in the first round, so I'll take a minute to explain it. You've often heard that security is not a product, it is a process. And that's exactly what we exemplify in Operation Defend the North. What we've done is we have created a fictitious scenario. And I'll be specific and tell you it's a scenario where a telecom service provider suffers a major outage. But there's some concern. Is this an outage because of a technical issue, a glitch, a misconfigured file maybe that needs to be reconfigured? Or is there something more that's happening? Across 5 modules, what we will deal with is trying to understand what is happening within this environment. And we will take on roles within that fictitious telecom and work with technical specialists to come closer and closer to an understanding of, is this a technical breach or a technical misconfiguration, or is it a breach in an incident? As we escalate through the process, you will see a number of security incidents unfold, and we'll be working across multiple modules as advisors and also with the wider partner and vendor community to try and address the issue of the outage at this fictitious telecom. It's an immersive tabletop exercise, and this time around, besides just having people in person and online, you will have the opportunity to chime in through polls and a variety of different engagement features. So think of it as a day that you're going to spend with some really, really interesting people in cyber working through an incident in real time. Alex, back to you.
Thank you, Ali. And speaking of technical glitches on live streams, it's always a little bit of a glitch, but Ali, we got your laptop microphone running, not that high-end one. So we'll see on the next question. All right, so let's introduce our panels. So to kick things off, I'd like to invite our guests to introduce themselves briefly, and 3 questions, 3.5. Your name and what do you do? One thing that excites you about cybersecurity, and if you were a hacker back in high school, what would your hacker nickname be? Mary, you're on my screen first.
I'm trying to think about what my hacker nickname is. My background is so different. I'm actually a CPA, so I'm all about following the rules and compliance. So my name is Mary Carmichael, and I'm the president of the SACA Vancouver chapter. So SACA is a global professional association for technology professionals in the fields of cybersecurity, risk management, audit, and data security. So we have 1,000 members here in Vancouver, and we're happy to support this event, especially when it comes to incident response, just discussing the big question of business continuity. As for my hacker name, I don't know. Let's call it Barbie. I'll go with Barbie.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next up is Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm the Security Operations Center lead at Mark Anthony Group. We are the makers of White Claw and Dylan's fine ready-to-drink beverages. One thing that excites me about cybersecurity, when I go to work every day, I get to protect my friends and my colleagues from people that would do them harm. I get to help my family stop people from stealing things that they've worked hard to achieve. That gets me going. If I was a hacker in high school, what would my nickname be? Oh, I don't know. I had a lot of nicknames in high school. I can't repeat them here. I'm going to take a pass on that one.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, over to Darren.
Excuse me. Good morning, everyone. My name is Darren Young. What do? I am a teacher of cybersecurity here in Burnaby, BC, just a suburb of Vancouver. And I've been doing that for the past 5 years. One thing that excites me about cybersecurity, I think it's something that you never know what is around the corner because it changes and fluctuates and yeah, there's so many different facets of it, and yeah, that's something that always keeps me on my toes, especially when I talk to my students about it. And if I were a hacker back in high school, I won't say if I was or wasn't, but what would my hacker nickname be? I would have to go with the pseudonym that I've had since elementary school. So if you see the pseudonym Penfo around, I'll let people figure out how it's spelt. That would be my hacker name.
Awesome. Like the roofing company, Penfold?
No, Penfo.
Oh,
Phonetic
Penfo. Okay.
F-O, faux sound. Yeah.
There's a roofing company that is on every radio station.
Yes,
advertising
it is a Canadian company, and we're familiar with that out here in Vancouver as well.
Awesome. Next up, Maddie.
Hey, name is Maddie, the CEO founder of CyberX. I have the honor and privilege of being around all of you amazing folks. What do I love about cybersecurity? I think it's the human element. That's a big one for me, to be able to take that humanistic approach, especially when it comes to social engineering, and then translating that into gamification, hence Operation Defend the North. A name that I went with was 313. I still use it every once in a while, so that's what it is.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, TJ.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is TJ Odubison I am happy to be here. Yeah, what I do on a daily basis is to ensure that I help protect people. I help protect resources that have been given to us by Mother Nature, and lastly, I help protect environment. So I'm very excited about cybersecurity because this is a huge responsibility to ensure that our land, our people are protected from threat actor, and at the same time our economy continue to grow. If I'm going to talk about my Aka's name, I usually love to use the word encoded, so I would think creepy encoder would be my Aka's name. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. And last but not least is Roshan. Can you do an introduction?
Hi, yes, of course. So my name is Roshan. I'm a tech at CyberX. So that entails, managing and helping the out of the different exercises and that we do. One thing, or actually two things that excites me about cybersecurity is one is staying one step ahead. You kind of feel like you're in the know. Um, and then the collaboration aspect. I love that there's so many different events where we get to learn from each other. Um, and then a pseudonym for hacking. I was in high school. I found one recently that I kind of liked, but I don't know if it's original. It's Dadofang. I liked that one, but
Awesome. Awesome. All right, and let's get into it. I was going to say, what excites me is the challenge of, not necessarily the whack-a-mole game that we perpetually play, but the challenge of solving problems and especially complex ones. And for my hacker name, I'm going to skip that one as well because that's part of my life that is ideally not on any more hard drives anymore. All right, so the first question I want to get into is incident response capabilities and really where to start. So, like fire escape plans, having an incident response capability is no longer a nice to have. It's table stakes for any digitally enabled business to reduce the blast radius and increase the business's resilience. And on my YouTube channel, I've been experimenting with the YouTube Shorts, breaking down different aspects of the incident response lifecycle. That is prepare, detect and analyze, contain, and eradicate and recover, and lastly, post-incident activities. And I've been doing that in 3-minute bite-sized chunks. So as you can imagine, these videos resemble a clown car of information. So first question, what are some of the common pitfalls in implementing or maturing incident response capabilities within a company? Anyone want to go first? Mary.
Oh, I was just thinking, it's more bringing the business along in terms of why we need to do that exercise. So, how does incident response help in terms of mitigating any type of disruption, especially in terms of unauthorized breaches, having your services unavailable? So now I think it's good to highlight that these breaches will actually cause an impact at an organized level. So it's like, how do you facilitate that conversation with the executive team and also senior leadership, but the need for this function and also the reporting, because now depending on your sector, you will need to report on your business continuity plans to the board of directors and also the audit committee, because now it's listed as an enterprise risk. So I think the biggest change I found is now getting the business more involved, but also it's a team sport. So when you have these exercises, you have to bring everyone together from legal to the executive to IT to comms to risk. So how do we support each other as a team going through this exercise to protect the organization or mitigate the risk of a disruption?
Awesome. And you're totally right. SEC brought in rules a few years ago that forced companies to level up and describe how they're doing cybersecurity, and incident response capabilities as part of that. And we're also now seeing that with a mandate in Alberta that all energy sector will need to have a very similar security management plan that would include incident response capabilities. Who's up next?
I think for
Ali?
me, I'll bring it up here. For one of the things that that I come across a lot with a lot of organizations, I think we put a lot of emphasis on security awareness training, and those things are important at the same time. But how do we take the frontline staff and let them understand? So you talk about fire drills. When a fire drill happens, everyone's involved in the fire drill, from the teachers to the janitors to the grade 1 to even junior kindergarten. And how do we get them involved? So how do you get frontline staff involved? How do you get the whole organization holistically involved, including third-party vendors, etc.? And I think some of the common pitfalls are it's expensive, it's costly, it's mundane, it takes a lot of time to put together. And organizations are a lot of times not prepared. And when they do look at putting these together, they go to their consulting firms. And again, when you look at the dollars and cents, you're like, wait a minute, is it worth it? Let's just spend the money on security awareness training. So I think that's one of the lessons learned along the way. And when as we're sort of going along with Operation Defend the North, is hearing the common problem, which is how do we make everyone else aware?
Awesome. And at the end of the day, like, awareness is about improving awareness of the business's executive layer of what bad day looks like. And if you think anything cybersecurity is expensive, they don't know what the expenses of a catastrophic impact to the business. And that's well beyond ransomware, the impacts to the actual business. Ali, you're up next.
Yeah, hopefully I've got the right mic now tuning in and you can hear
crispy. Love it.
Love it. All right, fantastic. I'll take a minute and a half and tell you my perspective on this. I get it. There are pitfalls, there are challenges with creating a good incident response plan and getting your teams ready. But I think when I look at it from my vantage point, it comes down to how I've been trained myself to execute some of these exercises. And one of the things we don't necessarily, and I'm curious to hear what Darren's perspective is on this, at universities and colleges, I don't think we put a lot of emphasis on how learners actually learn and how people, we talk about muscle memory, we talk about all of these other concepts from a psychological perspective, but we really need to understand how learners learn and how do they retain that learning. With training over the last couple of years in AI, ML, and when you start writing models and you start seeing connections and neural nets, etc., you begin to realize that you have to really take into account how people learn things and then how they execute and how they remember on it in different contexts. That's not an easy challenge to overcome. And as security professionals, we say, yeah, we have security awareness. Oh, we did a tabletop. But what did they actually learn and what did they remember? That's my challenge right now. Fiscal and financial realities is an obvious one for everybody. But that thing about how I think about my audience and how I think about my team members and how they take in information, that's a gap that I have. And Operation Defend the North, to a degree, helps address some of those gaps, but there's always more.
Awesome. Over to Darren.
Yeah, excuse me. So for me, one of the things that I tell my students right away when I introduce cybersecurity and start talking about that is the weakest link in any system is always going to be the human. We make mistakes and we're the ones that falter. And for me as a teacher, teaching high school students, I just want them to, that's one of the things that I want them to remember. So definitely training the individuals, training your staff, training the students is really, really important. Back to Ali about students learning and what they remember. Sometimes a lot of important learning and remembering is actually done through failure. And what I try to provide is a safe place for them to fail, where the stakes are high, so to speak. Yes, it's their grades and their assignments and their exercises, but nobody's going to lose $500,000 or $1 million, or nobody's going to die if something they don't find the bug or the breach, but it gives them a chance to experience it and learn it. And sometimes some of the challenge that I give them, especially with programming, when I teach them programming later on in the year, about around now, late spring or early spring, late spring, towards the end of the school year, when they're working on a programming problem, and because of my experience, I know what the I look at their code, I know exactly what their problem is, or maybe it takes me a few moments to look through it and see what the problem is. I'll basically say, yep, I know what it is, and just get up and walk away. I want them to feel that pain of trying to struggle through it and to solve it, as well as when they do find it, they're going to remember it that much more because the answer wasn't given to them. Nowadays with AI and stuff like that, you can put the prompts into an AI system, and it'll spit out the answer. And it's too easy sometimes. Well, I want them to have that perseverance, that struggle, so that they do learn and that they do grow from it. And I think that's an important aspect of learning that students and everybody needs to know.
Amen. And the dogma of you have to know everything in a body of knowledge just doesn't scale in our world.
Yeah.
And really, the skill set is knowing how to solve those problems. And a concept from Ray Dalio is failing well. So being able to know how to handle failure and use that to get to the actual destination is the strength. It's not memorizing a 3-inch thick book. It is knowing that book exists and where that information is. TJ.
Yeah, it looks like my mic is still muted here. Can you guys hear me?
You're coming in clear.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, for me, it is no brainer that incident response capability is one of the best control that an organization can put in place. And I can tell you that I've seen a lot of organizations have very good controls in place, but they never pay attention to their incident response capability. And as we all know that no matter the control we put in place today, definitely the bad guys are still going to find their way in. It's a matter of when they are going to be in, not if they are going to be in at all. So it is no brainer for organization to pay attention to incident response capability, making sure that they've got their preparation in place. And this also aligns with what some of the speakers here have said about learning. If you are putting in a very solid incident response capability for your organization, the learning part is very key, because you can have all this fancy plan put together. You can have all this beautiful team set up. If they do not practice that plan, when the time comes for them to respond, it's going to be a struggle, because they have not built muscle memory to rehearse, plan, and be readily available to respond to incidents. So it's, like I said, it's very, very important for organizations to build this capability, because they are going to get hit. And when they get hit, it is how much preparation they have put into building their incident response capability that is going to determine how quickly they are going to get out of, that incident. Thank you.
Awesome. Plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. I'm going to jump to the next conversation starter here. The Blue Team Existential Crisis and Business Resiliency. But first,
I can just take, just 30
Sure.
seconds.
Sure, jump in.
One thing that I've really begun to appreciate about these incident response plans is the element of surprise. And I have, in the last 3 months, introduced a scenario with nobody knowing that it's happening. And I can tell you that the results have been terrible in many cases, because again, you have to play with the context people are in. And what has really changed for me from an incident response and planning perspective is dealing with social engineering related incident response exercises. It's funny how you can buy a FedEx costume for $20 from Amazon and then get access into an office and the stuff that happens after that. So that element of surprise, that element of creativity now, and frankly, I don't put that onus on a third-party vendor coming to me and doing it for it. I think as a lead of a team, I have to embody that. It's a big pressure, but I think that's the future of leadership in security.
Awesome. And we thought that was your Halloween costume. All right. So let's get into the next topic, the Blue Team's Existential Crisis and Business Resiliency. But first, we're going to post up the discount codes to attend Operation Defend the North, both in person or virtually. So I think it's up here or down here, but we'll leave it up on screen a little bit longer this time so people can type it in and get their tickets. So last year, after a real fascinating conversation I had with a wildfire incident commander, I coined the term the Blue Team's Existential Crisis. And that's because at face value, our roles were really similar, but there was a very stark difference. Wildfire incident commanders accept the limited resources they have. They accept things will burn, and they really focus on limiting the blast radius and recovery efforts more than trying to stop the fire. Now, whereas the blue team, based on our schooling, our training, our certifications, and all that badass marketing that we all know and love, it's given us the impression that if we put another dollar in and spend a bit more time, we can stop those bad guys. But that's a fallacy because we haven't, we can't, and we likely won't. And I know that is a dire statement, but it is sort of true. And that's really where I came up with that epiphany of the blue teamers crisis. And it isn't, we need to shift our focus to move away from thinking we can stop all the bad things and really focus on enabling the business to limit what will happen when it does, and survive those inevitable bad days. So, question to my guests: what is your take on the blue team, how it's operated thus far, and does the philosophy need to change, or am I just a jaded blue teamer? Michael, over to you first.
Well, I think from what I've seen, especially in a bunch of in smaller companies, is that there's an enormous amount of time and effort spent on prevention, and prevention will only get you so far. What we don't do, and I guess what we're talking about here today is there's an investment in prevention, certainly things like, your obvious, your multi-factor, strong identities, all the things that we talk about all the time, all day long. But then there's also recovery and response recovery, prevention. Those are three different streams. And yeah, okay, you're going to get breached, but if you're going to get back up and running in a week or two versus a month or two, that's millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? We saw the company, I'm sorry, I don't remember their name, the company that makes Stoli in the United States. They were ransomwared in August of last year. They didn't come back to full capacity until January of this year. And because of that, they declared Chapter 11. If they had a plan and a resilience plan and a recovery plan, maybe they did, I don't know. But the point is, if they did, and they followed it and they practiced it, maybe that 5-month turnaround to normalcy would have been a month or 6 weeks, and maybe then there wouldn't be Chapter 11 involved, right? So I think that again, my experience is that we as blue teamers say, no, nobody's getting into my zone, and then when they do, we don't necessarily have a plan to get back to the way it was or better than the way it was before they got in.
Amen. I see a very asymmetric balance with the preventative and detective stuff versus the recovery capabilities. And again, I'm on the fence whether this is just a blue teamer problem, or does the business also just see all solutions are solved by buying something, and something tangible and physical, or I guess software these days, but not necessarily recognizing that the recovery side of it is likely, it certainly relies on some backups, but is certainly much more heavily reliant on people and process, which is not sexy. It's not something you can buy out of box, and thus where I see a major imbalance. TJ, you're next. And you are on mute.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just trying to control my external voice from interrupting into our conversation today. Yeah, I tell you that the way I see blue teamer today, I think that everybody needs to up their game. I've seen a lot of blue teamer trying to defend their assets, trying to defend their environment. However, they don't usually pay attention to how the adversaries, perpetrate their evil. So the knowledge of, adversary is very, very important to be a solid blue teamer. And how do you put yourself in the mind of an attacker if you don't know how they do their thing? So what I call the next generation blue teamer should be a blue teamer that will not only be in the mind of attacker to be able to defend their infrastructure or their information assets, but also employ the next gen defense capabilities. Attackers are using AI-powered tools to infiltrate our defenses. And do we think as a blue teamer we are going to rely on traditional legacy tool to defend against AI-powered attack? No, the answer is no. So is what I call fire for fire. So the attacker is bringing in adversaries that are using AI-powered attack on us. Then we need to step up our game to ensure we employ AI-powered defense tools so that we can properly defend against, these bad guys, and always be in their mind. We should be 2 steps ahead. If they have taken 1 step, we should, when you are playing chess, you have to be thinking ahead of what your opponent is going to do. So, and that's why I encourage the blue teamer, to position themselves to be able to withstand this next gen attack.
Thank you for that, TJ. And back to Ali's point is that the attackers are now using AI, and all businesses are using AI, and arguably cyber criminals is a business. But it changes the dynamic from strictly a technology issue and moving much further into the softer side, where AI is being used for very advanced next generation social engineering, which creates this problem of authenticity of what is real, and our users, which we are relying on more and more, are going to be more and more challenged with knowing what is and is not real. Looking on my screen, Ali, you've got your hand up.
I'll extend from what TJ said, and I'll make a point about how you even build. And I'm speaking from my vantage point and my sort of parlance is when you're building your blue team, the individuals that are in that team, you really have to have a good sense of the personalities that are there. We talk a lot about the diversity in terms of from a DI perspective, but diversity also of thought, diversity of talent, diversity of perspectives. If you have a blue team that is, and I'm going to speak very transparently about this, if you have a blue team that is very monolithic, very homogenous in its experiences, in their lived realities, you've got a problem. I will never sit in a blue or put together a blue team where everyone's same institution, same training, lived in one particular country their whole entire time, switched a couple of jobs, and here they are. Absolutely not. I'm going to look for people, to quote George Alcura, to quote a lot of the folks that I met at CISO Forum as well, who have actually gone and fought battles. For me, it's very clear. You're part of a wing that is defensive. You are part of, I'm not going to use the word military to a degree, but you are part of fighting wars. And you get experiences from different sources. You train mentally and technically in different ways. And I want to see that diversity. I think when you bring that diversity into your team, it builds a kind of culture. And when you have that one person who's very politically astute and brings those to your lunches and learns, you have another person that may be focused on the economic side and they bring that. Yesterday, for example, in one of my team meetings, one of the team members says, "Hey, did you know Iraq's planning to completely abolish their paper currency and they're going fully digital?" And then a conversation came up, what does this mean for fiat? And then you begin those conversations and people begin to draw from that. Diversity of thought, diversity of thinking, diversity of link are all critical to making sure that your blue team isn't stale. It's never set in stone, it's always set in jello.
Thanks for that. And Meredith, I guess I missed you last time, but jump in here. And you're on mute. Preemptive mute.
Thank you for noting that. I'd like to just kind of discuss the blue team does work in a more of a bigger picture context. So just given my background in internal audit and enterprise risk, there's a dependency on the blue team in terms of reporting those results upwards. So I can report to the applicable committee about what is the security posture. And then even with internal audit, we do take a look at blue team's activities to make sure that we're testing a mix of controls. So whether it's preventative, detective, and also corrective. Because part of that is when you have these cyber risks, you want to make sure there's an overlay of controls. So if one control fails, another one will kick up or will step up in terms of compensating controls. So we do take a look at the logic about these controls, how they are functioning, and whether or not they're being tested. So that's more from an internal audit point of view. So I do want to highlight that the blue team does work collaboratively with other groups in the organization. And also that information they produce is helpful in terms of educating people about what the security risk is, where we need to make additional investments.
So I love that continuous improvement feedback loop. But, just follow up with that. Is that, do you see that, or do you believe that exists across the board, or is that at a very higher maturity level of an organization?
So I tend to work for more enterprise organizations. So that is a higher maturity level. So part of that is usually you have a risk committee when it comes to cyber risk. So that gets reported and there's a risk score, and then that influences once again the budgeting process for cyber investments. So that is that's more of the I call it the gold standard or a leading industry practice. So that's something to work towards. But then the challenge is, let's say you're a small organization, are you able to afford a blue team? How do you provide that service? Are you gambling, hoping that since you're a small, maybe like a car dealership, that no one's going to hack you? So that's where you kind of have the gambling. I remember a long time ago, I attended a meeting where someone made a comment saying, as long as we're not the slowest runner among the group, the bear will not get us. So there, I thought that was interesting. A bear chasing people. As long as we're not slow, we're fine. But I'm not sure if that's the mentality anymore. So you need to assume breach, and part of that is providing resources to small and medium businesses in Canada to help educate them, and also like what does good cyber hygiene look like.
Thanks for that. Over to you, Maddie.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great question about crisis and awakening. I think we're on a evolution of awakening, and what do I mean by that is, I could buy all the fitness equipment. If I don't know how to use it, I'm not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But at the same time, if I don't know how to use those equipments properly, I'm going to injure myself. And so, yeah, you can have all the tools, and it's kind of touching a little bit of Ali saying about the mindset, right? Defending is not just a skill; it's really a mindset. I mean, you could take any system and power it off, throw it in a concrete wall block, and have guards protect it. That's the only way you're going to really secure a system. And the color blue has different shades to it. And I think one of them, the most important one in this awakening, is the recovery and how to survive. And so for me, blue teaming is not just, the defense, but it's really helping how to survive and recover from what is going to happen.
I appreciate that. And I think the modern version of blue team really does have to focus on that recovery. And again, maybe I'm just a jaded blue teamer, but I do feel that if you wear that title, you are so focused on preventative and detective, and not really recognizing that recovery piece, that business continuity piece, should start falling into that category. But yeah, zooming out to all the tooling that is sold on the internet and advertised in airports, is how much of that is actually even close to a recovery capability. And you don't see it.
And just using basketball as an analogy against defense again, right? Scottie Pippen said it the best offense is the best defense. Sometimes you're defending when you're up. Sometimes you're defending when you're down. It's really, the time that we're talking about this is when you're down. How do you defend when you're down to help the offense? And so I think that's the awakening, I think, that is coming. And our teams are changing quite dramatically as well.
Awesome. So do we think that, I call it like an absolutism of we must secure all the things. Is this just a technical blue teamer problem, or is this still sort of at the business level of what they're looking at when we talk about cyber risk? They're approaching it as we must stop all the things and we'll throw money to solve that problem, or are we starting to see that businesses are starting to realize let's make sure that we can recover if this does? And again, it's probably more a when than if. Mary?
Oh, thank you for introducing the topic of risk management. So part of that is understanding what are your critical systems and ensuring that they have the appropriate levels of control. So just given limited resources, part of that is working through the business to have that risk assessment, which is pretty much the business impact assessment. So what's critical to your operations? And then from there, working with the business teams and the technical teams in terms of even recovery times, objectives, a suitable data loss. But it kind of goes back to the point, you need to test out that plan and see whether you're able to recover within those time frames that were specified.
Yeah. And again, I'm such a fan of tabletop exercises because it's probably the cheapest thing a company can do internally to increase awareness of their technical problems, the procedural problems, but also increase awareness at that level of the business that doesn't think IT is their problem. And at the end of the day, there's almost no business that IT an IT failure would not impact that business. And there is still a bit of a disconnect. I cringe when organizations say that IT is a cost center, because unless you don't use computers, it's actually a critical part of your business. And calling it a cost center really suggests that if you could, you would pay less for it. And that really is suggesting that how your business runs, you would actually be willing to risk its operational stability to save some money rather than focusing on the profitability. All right, let's jump into the next topic, nurturing the next generation. So as I probably mentioned, I'm a proud father of a future hacker. So he's 5 now, and he's already shoulder surfing, brute forcing, and social engineering his way to fun, accessing games, and profit. He has now become aware of the Amazon Buy Now button. So I've dropped the ball a little bit. I sort of thought I had another year or two before I needed to start hardening the endpoints. At Operation Defend the North, we're also hosting the Young Defenders of the North Capture the Flag competition. And this is a competition for local high school students. And while I love supporting the community, this is actually threat intel for me. So I need to know what I'm up against in a few years. So I'm going to pass it to some of the team members that are organizing this within the Operation Defend the North. If you wanted to give a little bit about it, Darren, did you want to start things off? And you're on mute.
There we go. I think I'll let Ali talk a little bit about that a bit, and I can talk a bit from a teacher and a student point of view.
Sounds good. So what we've done with what we've called Young Defenders of the North is take a scenario from what's happening at Operation Defend the North and see how some of our young defenders would deal with it. Now, obviously, you'll have to wait until April 3rd to understand the intricacies. But one of the realities of this simulated attack during ODTN is the attacker moving laterally, not just within one organization, but to other critical organizations within the BC area. What we've done is we've taken one other potential victim and created a scenario with a whole bunch of logs, a whole bunch of assets. And these young defenders will have to try and determine, is that institution experiencing an attack based on what is happening in our fictitious telecom, or is it something completely different? They learn 3 things. Number 1, understanding how to actually look at information and do an investigation. Number 2, good technologists are often very, very good communicators, so they'll be learning how to communicate better. And number 3 is they'll have to make a determination around attribution. Can we say for sure that that they're experiencing in their environment is a cyber incident, and is it related to what's happening in the telecom? So we're putting them in reality. They won't be breaking into any digital environments, but we'll be providing them the logs. And this is their first exposure into how to deal with an incident in real time. And I want to give a shout out to Roshan, who has put together the entire scenario and will be leading it with some support from myself. There are a couple of interesting curveballs, and the shout out for this goes to Maddie and Zainab for making this happen. There's money involved in this. So if they want to get some tips or added information, they'll have a little bit of money at their table. Maybe they can bribe Roshan into giving them some information, or they might want to bribe one of their other competitive colleagues, the other groups perhaps, to give them the information, and maybe they'll help each other out. There are points for how much money you have left at the end, and also points for how much did you spend and what was the return on that. Darren, back to you.
Just make sure I'm not muted there. Yeah, I think this gives the kids an opportunity to maybe stretch themselves and use some of the lateral thinking that that they may not be able to exercise in school. I find that a lot of students, they're in class, that's their mindset isn't that. So when they're in math class, they're thinking math. But when I take them into my programming class, then I ask them to apply some math type thinking. It takes a while for them to to shift to that gear. But given an environment like this, I'm hoping that they can draw on all of these different experiences. What I teach in my cybersecurity classes, it's fairly dry and academic, but I'm hoping that with this they're able to start seeing some of the concepts and pieces that I've been teaching and showing them, and where they can start applying it to almost real life scenario, and exercise those strengths and brain muscles that I wouldn't be able to give them a chance to, just because of my limited field of knowledge and skills.
Awesome.
I think one of the other things, just to kind of bring into this, I know your question is, and a lot of times we get this, right? Hey, you're teaching a 17-year-old, 18-year-old like how to hack. Like, that's not good. And I think it comes down to intent, right? I have a 5-year-old that I've given a knife to. I've taught him to be safe with that knife when he cuts his little waffles. Now, if I'm not teaching him or her, what can happen and what can go wrong, they're going to go learn it themselves. He's going to go pull out his knife himself and figure it out, or a gun, or even a car. When I'm teaching my son how to drive right now, and I'm teaching him responsibility. Pay attention to the road. And that car could also be used as a weapon, in terms of he could go drag racing and drive 180 kilometers an hour. So for me, when it comes to us teaching the young generation or the young defenders, is we're solving the cybersecurity skill gap by giving them the tools and creating that early excitement when it comes to cybersecurity. Number two, we're giving them a structured sort of process and a guidance. Here at Young Defenders of the North, for example, people like Michael and Mary and Alex, yourself and TJ and many of the other advisors will have the opportunity to go upstairs to the young defenders, talk to them about their experiences, talk to them about different ways to break into the market, teach them about different cool things that they can do. And just to kind of end off here, there could be a child in there that is a red teamer by innately, right? He or she likes to break things. Now, that could be used for good and it could be used for bad. And if we give them the guidance and say, hey, wait a minute, that skill of breaking into things should not to do something criminal, but used to help an organization, and you can make money off of it, and you can enact change and help people. Now the intent changes. And so for me, I think is tapping into that creativity, tapping into those young minds that are able to think and do things that I can't do anymore, with the right guidance, is going to help the future.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Again, I've run B-Sides Vancouver for a number of years with Capture the Flag, so I like to wear black hoodies. But it's always this balance of giving them as Maggie said, the knife without the sort of context training and potentially discussion of ethics, morals, and laws. First, I think the Defenders of the North is really sharing something that is on the blue team side, which gives them an actual marketable skill that is likely going to be one of their first jobs. Red teaming skill set is interesting, but not necessarily what you're going to jump into right out of school. But yeah, again, I'm torn with that, because there's at a certain age where you're teaching them skill sets that they don't necessarily contextualize the consequences. And it's where is that line? And I think the programs that Darren's running really help them learn those skills, but not in an isolated environment where they can use those skills for bad, but recognizing that's what they are, and this is how we defend against it. Darren, jump in here.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, usually one of the questions I get early on in the beginning of the year is my students ask, "Hey, Mr. Young, are you going to teach us how to hack?" And I kind of answer no, like this, because the skills that I'm teaching them, whether it's in programming or cybersecurity and the tools that they're learning and things like that, I'm teaching them as a skill set for cybersecurity, but also these skills can be used for hacking. And yes, there is an ethics behind it. I want to give them a right frame set to think about it and the ethics behind it. One of the things that I joke with when I teach my programming class is I tell my students, me personally, I have a vested interest to teach my students how to program well. And they ask, why is that? And I said, well, it's because I don't want to die. All right. The students that I teach, they're going to be writing the software of the future. These are the leaders of the future. So I don't want the plane to fall out of the sky. I don't want the software to crash or the medical equipment to become breached. So I give them that challenge at the beginning, because even though right now they're young, they're kids, they're having fun, they're learning these things. I want to plant that seed in the back of their mind to think of a bigger picture of what's going on. And I've been fortunate to be at this game for 20 years and teaching high school kids about computers and cybersecurity and stuff like that.
It is a scary software-defined future we have. Over to Mary.
I think we need to change the optics of hacking, because hacking to me is all about testing control effectiveness. So to me, it's actually a good thing. So as an accountant, I'll share a secret with you. We try to hack into our own accounting systems. We try to see the logic, see the internal controls are in place, who has access. So when you give accountants, here's your new financial system, we attempt to break it. So I think we just want to make sure that the controls are in place or working as expected. So hacking is a good thing because it protects the organization. And I do want to highlight Darren's comments about the skills involved. So I think it's important to highlight this is a team sport. So when you have these hackathons, you have to work together as a team. So and how do you share information? How do you coordinate? And also I do like to highlight just the problem solving. And then afterwards, at the end of this exercise, presenting the results in terms of how do you communicate the results of your approach and the effectiveness to a group. So I think that's a key skill. And lastly, just to wrap it up, I do want to highlight Canada has a national cybersecurity strategy that was released back in February. And the main goal of that strategy is to make Canada a leader, a global leader when it comes to cybersecurity. And having exercises like this helps us achieve that goal. So we need to develop the talent, and also just testing, developing people's skill sets, working together in partnership with CyberX. We're on the path to become a global leader in cybersecurity. So thanks again for CyberX for partnering up with the SACA, and also Darren, who's a volunteer leading this effort with Young Defenders of the North.
Thanks, Mary. Over to you, Michael.
So, like you, I'm a proud father. I have an 11-year-old, going on 15, and she's starting middle school in the fall, and she has a laptop, and that laptop has Google Chrome on it, which means that she has the sum total experience and knowledge of all the hacking information on the internet, and there's a lot of it. And any of us that tells ourselves anything different is being a fool. Let's just call it that, right? So if we don't teach our kids, my daughter, your son, how to handle this information and what to do with it and where to go with it and all of that, all we need to do is listen to 3 or 4 episodes of Darknet Diaries, and we will know exactly what happens, right? Somebody's going to end up in jail. Somebody's going to end up a millionaire, or both, depending on what order we do those things in, right? But what we need to understand is if we don't teach these kids, hey, yeah, you can hack all day long, but use a platform like HackerOne or Yes We Hack or Hack the Box, or where there are set rules of engagement and this is how to follow them. This is where we're going to go and do hacking because they've said that you can within these boundaries. And this is what you do when you find something. If you go outside of those rules, you're going to be in a whole world of trouble. And my legal budget is not very big. So, sorry, kid. But hey, otherwise, go at it within the scope. You can go make enough money to buy a car before I can afford to buy you one. So, I mean, hey, I live in Vancouver, so it's expensive here, right? But this is the reality that we're in. And I think that anyone that says, hey, you shouldn't teach hacking, well, I'm sorry, you have a phone with Google Chrome on it, you can read. Like, that's all you need.
Awesome. Before we go to Maddie, one question, a quick question to Darren is, are we going to see, or have we seen that, instead of the police officer coming in with the little suitcase display case of drugs, they're now going to be doing it with hacking tools and whatnot? And is that for the kids or potentially for the parents that need to start recognizing, what that funny colored USB key actually does?
Yeah, these are cyber tools. These are cyber weapons. They can be used to do quite a bit of damage. The again, I bring up the analogy with my students with the classes that they teach. Yeah, they take woodshop and they learn to use all these power tools and things like that. At the same time, you could use a hammer to kill somebody, and if you do, that's the evidence of the murder weapon. But yeah, for the kids, just letting them, like I said, I want to give them space where they can explore safely. I can share a little bit more about that, but I'll let Maddie talk about that first, for his comment first, and then I'll come back to what I want to do.
No, I'll be very quick. Just one of the most powerful things I tell young people, especially when they ask, "Hey, are you going to teach us hacking?" is yes. So I take a completely different approach. And the letter that I share with them is the letter from Mark Zuckerberg to his investors. And if you look at where's Facebook located, if anyone knows, where's Facebook located? On Hackers Way. So if you ever get a chance, and this is for the audience out there, Google Mark Zuckerberg Hackers Way, and you can read his letter. And it kind of touches a little bit what Mary said, which is, hacking is not just, there is a negative connotation, right? But it's about testing boundaries, really, in a nutshell. And so these kids, when they sit there and they go, "Hey, are you going to teach us hacking?" Yes, we are, in an ethical way. We're going to teach you with boundaries, exactly what Michael said. And I'm sure what we're going to try to do at Young Defenders of the North. But thank you.
Awesome. Darren, is your hand still up?
Yeah, my hand's still up. I'll bring it. Yeah, one of the, I'll just share a little anecdote. I'll try to keep it brief. Long story short, last year I had one student entering in the program, a little bit on the outside, had issues with attendance and whatnot, but he was interested in computers, really, really bright kid. And he started poking around the school's network. And he was very forthcoming and say, "Hey, Mr. Young, I found this, I found that, I did this, I did that." And I said, "Okay, hold on. Before you get into trouble, what kind of information have you found?" And I said, basically, let's go talk to the principal about this. So we did, and he brought it up to the district principal. And what I kind of proposed to the district principal, of course, within reason, I said, would it be reasonable, would it be okay for this student to use these regular file explorers and not really active hacking tools, but just poking and prodding, and have him present a report to you of his findings. And my gist of that was, again, for an opportunity for him to learn, as well as the opportunity for the district to find out. And long story short, he went for grade 12 students here, they have to present a capstone project as part of their graduation requirement. So I said to the student, make two versions of your capstone. One really, really, really dumbed down that you got to present to your peers because they don't really need to know all the details. And another one that you can present to the district principal. Basically, he had presented it to the district principal. He had a long conversation, a couple hours, with one of the network technicians, the network admins at the school, and he was asking him, "Hey, where did you find this information?" And it was basically OSINT, along with just some unprotected and unlocked file shares, and he was able to dig up a treasure trove of information, and it was a great learning experience for him. And in the end of it, I said the only thing that he really couldn't do was send an invoice to the school district for all the consulting work, because that's really what he should have been able to do at the end of it. And because right there, actual life skills that he was able to pull. Just, most of it was on his own. Very little was it from me, but yeah, it was a good learning opportunity for him. And from last I heard, he's at BCIT doing the cyber program out there.
Amazing. We got a few minutes to wrap up here, but I will say last summer I read The Fancy Bear Goes Fishing, and there was also a Wired article looking back at the Mirai botnet, not associated with my company, and the history. And when that Mirai botnet first hit, I thought it was state sponsored. Everyone did, and it turned out it was 3 teenagers. And it really goes to show how brilliant these kids can be, and if they're left to their own devices and not, sort of provided supervised learning in this space, they can drift into what they may not see as bad or unethical. And all of them to this day have remorse and are now on the good side and whatnot, but they did go and made a software that is still used today to cause harm. But yeah, really, really interesting article if you can dig up the Wired one. So to wrap up, awesome conversations make minutes feel like seconds. I think we can all admit to that. So I want to thank all my guests for sharing their experience, and thanks for everyone for tuning in to this LinkedIn Live. Operation Defend the North is happening April 3rd in downtown Vancouver, and this is the first of its kind in Vancouver and not to be missed, but CyberX has been doing this for several years now. And what you can expect is experience an immersive live-fire tabletop exercise, learn from some of Canada's cyber thought leaders, and rub elbows with fellow defenders. So please visit cyberx.org. That's SIBERX.org to learn more about the event and use the discount codes from this live stream to scoop up a ticket before they're all sold out. And with that, stay resilient, stay secure, and keep defending the North.
Thank you.